Gracias, Roberto. That's it for my Spanish. It's a pretty hard gig following on from Peter Hutton, but there was a number of things that he touched on, personalised learning, for instance, that I'm sure in our schools we're either thinking a lot about or we're some way down the track. So at Loyola College, we have, in the last 3 years, embarked on what started as an action research project 3 years ago, and the last 2 years it's been rolled out in a limited form at the Year 7 level, in religious education, in humanities and in science. So I've put some information there about the goal and the strategy. The main thing is the research that I've done through these last 3 years was really answering one key question: how can we value and promote the learning, the student investing in their own learning? How can we engender in the student capacity in their own learning process? That's been the main goal as far as I'm concerned. There's a number of resources that I've put on the screen there which drove this research. Universal Design for Learning, UDL. There's a couple of books there that were published by the Personalised learning community in the US. And all this was started back in 2011-12 when I attended EduTech, and I had a look at the Horizon report, which said that within the next 5 years, so we're 1 or 2 years beyond that now, personalised learning was going to be one of those things that drive educational outcomes. And part of that was the technology that would support it. In terms of Schoolbox, the components that have helped support this project: e-portfolios, surveys, due work, and rubrics. So I'll be speaking a little bit about those. Okay, so the method that we used, start of semester, start of year. What are your students' strengths, challenges in terms of how do they access their learning, how they engage with the learning, and how they present their learning? So that was the first bit. And Schoolbox developed for me a survey called Personal Learning Backpack, which I attached to the portfolio, and there's a bunch of questions that they get asked, and they choose from drop-down lists on where their learning strengths are and where their learning challenges are, and what sort of methods they might think they might need in order to improve in each of those areas. That's called Personal Learning Backpack. Speaking to James yesterday, and he said that he sees a roadmap, and maybe by the end of the year that might be available to all schools, which would be fantastic. We also developed what we called a mid-project progress review. So formative assessment, really important part of personalised learning, and you attach that to due work items. And then at the end of the project, you give kids a chance to self-reflect. And I understand Ivan was, what was it, Girls' Grammar yesterday? Melbourne Girls' Grammar. Students came in and spoke a bit about that. So a lot of things coming together. Yesterday, there were a couple of talks about rubrics for testing effort. So I'll speak a little bit about that. Some examples of what the kids did. This is a personal learning backpack. These are the types of questions. Apologies that it's too small to see, but as an example, I'm good at or interested in, I'm not good at, interested in, what do I struggle with when investigating a new topic, I learn better when or by, what methods or technologies do I have trouble with when analysing a problem. So these PowerPoints are going to be made available to the community Roberto? Right, so you'll be able to see it there. So these are the questions that they answer for themselves as part of the survey. It gets linked to ePortfolio, and then within the class pages, these results are aggregated up at the class level so the teacher can see at the beginning of the unit, okay, these are my kids. They may not know the kids from a bar of soap, but at least they'll know something about them before they actually engage with creating or perhaps thinking about how they might differentiate the learning activities. This is an example of student choice. Student voice is the ultimate aim, and Peter Hutton's talk was really about student voice. Let the students drive what they want to learn, how they want to learn, and what those learning outcomes are going to be. In this case, it's more about student choice. So this is an example from a space, Year 7 space project, and it gives some categories. Within each categories, the types of outcomes or deliverables that the kids might want to create to demonstrate their learning. This is an example of a mid-project progress review. It's a due work outcome. The left-hand side there, these are the questions that the students prepare for themselves. How far through the project have I gone? This will be made specific to the actual task. This is a template. And they come to class, they spend the whole class working with one or two other students. They present what they've done, so that they might bring an artefact with them. And then in the top right-hand corner, the person that is reviewing their work will tell them, well, this is what I like about what you've done. This is where I think you can improve. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, the students self-reflect, how can I improve this so that I achieve a better result at the end? So the kids actually do this themselves. The teacher roams around the class and lends support as necessary. We do this at the Year 7 level, and usually it works okay. Some kids need a bit more support. But it's about the language of self-reflection. It's about the language of students reviewing each other's work and not being afraid to do it. And in fact, most students love talking about what they do, and that's what we found. These are 9 formative assessments that I pulled, actually 8. One of them, the bottom left-hand, is the one that we've created, Mid-Project Progress Review. The other 8 I've pulled straight out of the internet. And what we've done is we've given teachers choice as to what types of formative assessments they want to engage in. So you can find these on the internet. I've just put some image there to give them some visual identification. This is an example of our learning engagement rubric. So yesterday, if you were here for the learning analytics, there was an effort rubric that was spoken about. So they're doing that in South Australia, and effort was also spoken about by Paul from the Scots College in Sydney. This is our particular one that we've used. It's modified slightly over time. This is its current iteration. So learning engagement we've specified across 3 areas: your positive attitude, your problem-solving skills, and the degree to which you're invested in your own personal development. You might have heard of design thinking. You propose a provocative statement, and then you wait for people to react. So our provocative statement 3 years ago was, how can we encourage personalised learning? How can we encourage the valuing of learning engagement? Why don't we put a grade value on it? And we decided 3 years ago at the Year 7 level, because it was a pilot, let's give them a maximum of 10% on top of their actual assessment mark. And that really threw the cat amongst the pigeons because people started to be concerned about, are we giving away marks? In its last iteration last year, we reduced it from 10% to 9% just to make it easier on the eye with the rubric. And what we found was that, well, you'll see the results later, but what we found was it didn't necessarily translate into easier marks, but it did translate into more engagement in the learning process, which is what we were trying to achieve. So here's some stats. So we compared a project in which we didn't introduce personalised learning, so that was with religious education, and the two projects that we did introduce personalised learning was in science and humanities. And we found across three key, what we call classroom learning indicators, collaborative, strive for margis, it's a Jesuit term that means you dig deeper, you're extending yourself, and positive attitude. Across those three areas, there were improvements, and these are the teachers valuing the students in these three areas. We did some surveys. So student choice and voice in a differentiated curriculum enhances learning engagement. And these are the students telling us this. They actually value being able to choose how or what they're learning. Students strongly acknowledge that they benefit from understanding the learning approaches of other students, which formative assessment or peer feedback makes possible. They actually like hearing about what other students are doing, and they actually like talking about what they're doing with other students generally. So there's always some kids who need to be supported in that, obviously. The inclusion of learning engagement in an assessment rubric strongly focused students' attention on their learning process. So the idea was if we give learning engagement a value, then it forces at least some of the kids, and it forces a conversation in most cases. What does this actually mean? What do I actually have to do? And it may not have happened to the same degree had we not forced the issue by saying, hey, we're going to put a value on it. And I should say that we've now come to the end of, well, now 3 years. So personalised learning as a project is now finished at Loyola College, but there are elements of it that now continue, which is really the best thing that I could have hoped for. For instance, we've acknowledged that we need to do a lot more formative assessment, and Schoolbox will allow us to capture those formative assessment learnings through due work, for instance. We've also realised that we need to measure learning engagement. We need to measure how well our students are taking responsibility for their own learning. Do they understand their own learning process? And so over the next time frame, 12, 24 months, we're going to start looking at a rubric, and other schools are doing this as well, that can actually capture, for our purposes, the best way it can, what learning engagement looks like. And there's a few quotes there from teachers that, especially the last one, which they've seen a marked improvement in the engagement as a result of this type of project. Recommendations that have come out of the last 3 years are put up on the board there, and Schoolbox has played the Schoolbox kit has played an important part of that. The self-reflection and assessment feature that students can use, the rubrics that are going to be used to capture learning engagement, or effort in some cases, other schools call that. Also the surveys for the personal learning backpack, e-portfolios play a very important role there. Okay, so I'm almost out of time, just a few minutes for questions. That's great. Looks like they're saving all their questions for you, Nat.
Thanks, Victor.
Cheers.